In the previous lesson, we learned about the first Bootstrap component, dropdowns. In this lesson, we continue on a similar note, and we'll talk about button groups and button dropdowns. Button groups are very useful in applications or admin panels. You can create a group by wrapping a series of links or buttons with the class of btn in a container with the class of btn group. So, say we have a div which contains, let's see, 3 buttons with a class of btn. Let's do some default text and see how it looks like. So 3 buttons. Wrap these in a div with a class of btn group, and the layout will change. You can see that they are merged together. You can even have vertical groups. Just add the class of btn group vertical, and right now they are stacked instead of being inline. All right. Now, if you need more button groups, you can combine them in a div with a class of btn toolbar. So let me just show you that. Get rid of this, and say we have these 2 button groups. They look like this. Now combine them. Let's see, div with a class of btn toolbar. Get rid of that, and do a bit of cleanup. Alright, so you won't notice much difference, but if we check out the CSS, you'll notice that the toolbar adds a top and bottom 10 pixel margin. And also the gap between the 2 button groups is a bit smaller than the default. You can also add some pretty interesting functionality to buttons and button groups. For example, a button can have a loading state. So consider a simple button with a class of btn. All right, let's do type button, and we need to add data loading text equals the text you want to show when loading that button. So I'm just going to say simple loading. All right. Now, when you click it, nothing happens really, because you need to write some additional JavaScript to make this work. So I'm just gonna make a new script here. Okay. And I'm gonna say this. First of all, let's give this button an ID. Let's say loading button. And I'm gonna target it loading button. On click, we have a function. And we'll do this. We'll take the jQuery object and put it into a JavaScript variable. So var btn equals this. Now this is required because there are certain methods that cannot be applied directly to the JavaScript object. So once we do this, I can say btn dot button loading. So let's check it out. Once I click it, it now changes to a loading state. It shows the text, and also the style matches the disabled button. Now this will remain like this. The button will remain like this if you don't reset it. And you can use a timer to do that. I mean, even Bootstrap on their own demo page use the exact same method. So you would do set timeout. Okay. And first of all, the code is going to be a function. And the delay is going to be 3000. So after 3 seconds, I want btn button reset. So let's check it out. 1, 2, 3, and there it goes. It resets. Also, you can use a button as a toggle. So let's create another example here. Button with a class of btn, toggle button. So to create a toggle, simply add the attribute data toggle equals button. All right. So when you click it, it's going to change its state. Great. You can also use buttons as checkboxes or radio buttons. So on the first group right here, if I'm going to add data toggle equals buttons checkbox, clicking on any of them will change their state. Radio buttons are pretty similar. Simply add data toggle equals buttons radio. And they behave like radio buttons. When you click one button, the other resets. You can add drop-down menus to any buttons. You just need to place it in a btn group and provide some proper menu markup. And this is also great because it works with all button sizes, large, small, and mini. So let's see an example. I'm going to create an HR and then a button with a class of btn and btn primary. Okay. And I'm going to place this in a div with a class of btn group. All right, so something like this. If you remember from the previous lesson, the button should act as a trigger for the drop-down menu. So we're gonna do the text should be drop-down button, and also we're gonna add that little arrow. Next, we're gonna add the attribute data toggle drop-down to the button element. Next, we'll create our actual drop-down UL with a class of drop-down menu, which contains some list items with a bunch of anchor tags. Oops, this should be right here. All right, so let's check it out. All right, and there it is. Notice that the button here is cut off on the right side because it's part of a btn group. So if you want to show the full button, you need to add the drop down toggle class. And right now the button is shown at its original state. I was talking about button sizes earlier. Well, you can add the class of btn large and it's going to work, or btn mini or btn small. Any class you want, it will still work. Now, split button drop-downs are also available, and they will add a separator between the text and the drop-down arrow. The markup is really easy. Simply create two buttons instead of one. And also, the button sizes are also available. So let's see an example. So on our example right here, we have a btn group, which is correct. And I'm gonna add another button, okay, with a class of btn and also drop-down toggle, which will have data toggle equals drop-down, and we'll just use the small span with a class of caret, or B with a class of caret, it doesn't matter. And we need to remove some classes from the first button, and also this will be removed, and also the arrow will be removed. All right, so now this is how it looks like. We have one button, which if we click, nothing happens, and we have the second one, which opens our dropdown. And as I said, the button sizes are also available. So if I put btn large on the first button, I need to put btn large on the second button as well. Now, there are cases where you'll need to change the direction of the menu. You can change the drop down to a drop up by adding the drop up class to the immediate parent of your drop down menu. So in our case, that's the btn group. Okay, so just add drop up. And when you click it, the little icon also changes automatically, and the drop down is actually a drop up now. It appears above the button. Now, if you want all this functionality that we talked about, including the checkbox behavior and the loading state and the drop downs, it's important, it's required actually, that you include the bootstrap-button.js file. Bootstrap did a great job with buttons. You can do loads of stuff with them. Coming up, we'll talk about tabs, pills, and navigation lists.